Good evening. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. First of all, let me just quickly say my name's Anthony Arnove. I work with Haymarket Books. We're really privileged to be the publishers of the book that is the occasion for tonight's gathering, Black Power Mixtape. And I first want to start off by thanking our DJ Charlie Hustle, who really graced us with his tunes tonight. A couple of quick housekeeping announcements. There will be a book signing after the program, so please stick around. You can get books in the lobby from Haymarket Books, not only Black Power Mixtape, but you can get Black Panther Speak, which also features Kathleen Cleaver and a number of other great titles from Haymarket. Haymarket also has sign-up sheets that will be going around. Please sign up. You can find out about events like this, authors who will be in town, great publications. There's also a book club that you can sign up for as well. The signing will happen on stage, but the book selling's out in the lobby, so get your book out there and then line up, and Danny and Kathleen will sign books afterwards. There are also people who will be coming up and down the aisles at some point in the program with note cards. If you want to ask a question of any of the speakers tonight, you can just write down a note, and we'll pass them up to Michelle, who is moderating the evening, and she will read out questions in the course of the evening. Also, please turn off your national security tracking devices. We would like to have a nice 90 minutes without NSA interference as we engage in this really exciting and important conversation. A couple people I want to thank. Pamela Tillis from the New School, the Director of Public Programs here, who's allowed us to do a series of really wonderful collaborations, including tonight's collaboration. We want to thank her, the AV department, who put in yeoman work to make this possible simultaneously with another class that was happening right before this, so they were setting up two events at once. Jocelyn Barnes, the producer of the film Black Power Mixtape, who was invaluable in organizing this evening. Nicole Middleton, who works with Danny Glover and Carey Productions. Also, Jason Farbman from Haymarket Books. And quickly, I also want to thank three of the people who are filming tonight. Book TV, Democracy Now!, and WBAI. We're really thrilled to have all of them in the house tonight. And tell your friends who are not here that they can check out this program on those really vital networks in the coming weeks. And we'll put out the word at haymarketbooks.org about how you can find out about those broadcasts. I'll just quickly say a little bit about the speakers tonight and then turn it over to Michelle. I will also introduce a clip from the film. We're really lucky to have engaged in this fascinating collaboration with Joran Olsen, the director of the film Black Power Mixtape, to then create a book that grew out of the terrific material and images and interviews and speeches that they documented in the film. And as much as we're here to talk about the film, the book, we're also here to talk about this really terrific and important film. And DVDs of the film are available as well as the book in the lobby. So just to tell you a little bit about DJ Charlie Hustle, who was spinning the tunes and will also be here spinning during the book signing. He began his career as a DJ and music producer in Milwaukee, where he was born and raised. He attended Fordham in the Bronx, where he became the president of the Hip Hop Coalition. He's collaborated with DJ Danny Dan, The Beat Man, Rebel Diaz Arts Collective, Rebel Diaz, YC The Cynic, and many others, and produced songs for several artists. He is currently a member of the Bronx Boys Rocking Crew and RDACBX and lives in the South Bronx. Michelle Mater, who will be the moderator this evening, has a professional background that spans more than 25 years' experience as a film producer, writer, lecturer, arts administrator, film programmer, media consultant, Caribbean film scholar, and college professor. She is assistant professor of media studies and film at the New School here, where we're very excited to be doing this event. Brian Jones, who will also be on the program this evening, has taught elementary grades for 9 years in New York City's public school and is currently pursuing a graduate degree in urban education at CUNY's Graduate Center. He co-narrated the film The Inconvenient Truth Behind Waiting for Superman and contributed to the book, which is available in the lobby, Education and Capitalism. He's a member of the Movement of Rank and File Educators. Are there any other more folks in the house tonight? He's lent his voice to a number of audiobooks, including the John Carlos story and Marx and Soho. And I'm also pleased to announce tonight, I think this is the first announcement of this fact, that later this month, he is going to seek the Green Party's nomination to run for Lieutenant Governor of New York in the fall 2014 gubernatorial election. So stay tuned for Brian's upcoming campaign. Kathleen Cleaver is a senior lecturer at Emory Law School, a former member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and communications secretary of the Black Panther Party, and really needs no introduction. We're so honored to have her here tonight. Danny Glover, also known and loved to everyone, has been a commanding presence on screen and television for more than 25 years, as well as the stage. His film credits, I could spend an hour reading them. I'll just mention in particular one film I had the great privilege of working with him on called The People Speak, which I was able to make with Howard Zinn and Danny Glover, and really is one of the most important projects I've ever had the privilege of working on. In 2005, Glover co-founded New York-based Louverture Films with writer-producer Jocelyn Barnes and recent partners Susan Rockefeller and Matthew Pilevsky. The company is dedicated to the development and production of films of historical relevance, social purpose, commercial value, and artistic integrity. And one of their films, of course, is the Black Power Mixtape. So what we're going to do now is show the trailer to that film, and then we'll begin our panel. Thank you.
When someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible, because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country.
In the 1960s and 70s, Swedish filmmakers arrived in America to explore the Black Power movement, which the U.S. media saw as a violent threat.
We're making a revolution by educating the people to the fact that they should arm themselves for self-defense.
If any racist dog policemen attack us, we will defend ourselves because we are bent on surviving.
30 years later, in the cellar of a Swedish television station, an amazing collection of unseen interviews was discovered with some of the greatest revolutionary minds in modern history.
There wouldn't be an America if it wasn't for black people. We hold America to our bosom.
When you get tired enough, it's when you want to sacrifice everything.
Get ridiculed and discriminated and be less than a man.
It's a question of dignity and decency.
My husband didn't make enough money because he was Negro.
We were moved and motivated and charged up by people who had already made a commitment to bring about change.
Fight for liberation, oh yeah!
Dr. King is a great man, and he's very patient. Unfortunately, I am from a younger generation. I am not as patient, nor am I as merciful.
Black is beautiful, but black isn't power. Knowledge is power.
In this bankrupt country, there is a point where caution ends and cowardice begins.
The community was flooded with drugs. Hoover and the FBI, they made sure that the drugs were an influence.
Anybody can die nobly for a cause. The sign of maturity is to live day by day for that cause.
We have to document our history. If we're going to tell the story, let's tell the story right.
The Black Power Mixtape, 1967 to 1975, featuring Erykah Badu, Harry Belafonte, Stokely Carmichael, Eldridge Cleaver, Kathleen Cleaver, Angela Davis, Talib Kweli, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and Amir Questlove Thompson.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's an amazing house that we have here this evening. And needless to say, I am thrilled and honored to be able to partake in this amazing group of people that we have here. My name is Kwame Ture. I am a media studies and film professor here at the New School. And I do teach about things like this Black Power Mixtape thing. So this was right up my alley. When Pam Tillis asked me if I would moderate this, I was like, are you kidding me? But of course. So we're really thrilled to have such an amazing set of powerhouse folks here in the house with us this evening, don't you think? So in addition to thanking our panelists, I'd also like to thank you as our audience, because what it means is that you recognize and support this ongoing work and the commitment of these cultural warriors that we have here in our midst, and that we are continuing in the struggle for human rights, economic and education equality, and freedom of speech. The struggle continues. So tonight I'd like to frame the conversation that we're going to have around this sort of issue of education, and we have a lot of young people here in the audience, and how do we relate the issues that are represented in Black Power Mixtape, both the film and the book. And if you haven't seen the film, you have to see it. It's on Netflix, it's available, and then you must buy the book, of course. But it's really with this in mind that we'd like to emphasize the impact of this film and the companion book and their ability to influence our younger generation. Here we are at the New School, an institute of higher education, and we are all educators in one way or another. So there's probably 3 or 4 generations since this film was documenting this period, and so there's a lot that people don't know about. So really excited and just overwhelmed that this is possible to have here today. So, and we're going to watch some clips from the film too, so you will see some other parts of the film. But my first question to all of our panelists is, what was the impetus for you to put yourselves on the front line in this struggle? Brian, we know you were a little younger. And you can tell us last. But Kathleen and Danny, I'd love to hear what you felt your impetus was, your initial impetus. And there's the mic there, yes, please.
Well, in reality,
you got the mic. Sorry.
In reality, the impetus, in my case, I had joined SNCC. I mean, I've been wanting to join SNCC for a long time, but by the time I got to do it, which was here in New York, and I went to their office, it was 2 weeks after Stokely had made the call for Black Power. So I joined an organization that was in the process of getting committed to Black Power. I was, and I met people who were involved with the Black Panther Party. I was in the Black Power movement and ended up moving out to California in November of 1967, which was approximately about 4 or 5 weeks after Huey Newton was in an altercation and ended up wounded, in prison, charged with murder, policeman dead, and he was facing the gas chamber. I'm in a Black Power movement. I'm engaged to the leader of the Black Panther Party, who said, it's more important for me to save Huey's life than to keep myself on parole. So he was risking his parole, which meant going back to prison. Huey had already risked his life. Bobby Seale and other Panthers were in jail. There was about 5 of us. And he said, we got to get Huey out. So the impetus was actually a man who had started a revolutionary movement in the Black Power moment, 1967, who was facing the gas chamber. So we said, okay, let's do it, you know. It's free Huey.
Wow. Oh, Dan's good.
Well, I didn't have to go anywhere. I was born and raised in San Francisco. And I remember specifically the summer of 1966. And I had been attending, there was the Black Panther Party of America, a group that was formed out of Lowndes County. And I had been attending their meetings there that summer and it was a storefront right in the black community in the Fillmore area in San Francisco. And at the same time, I was about to go back to school and come to San Francisco State, so I was spending a lot of time out of San Francisco State as well. And in San Francisco State there was this large influx of men and women who had been involved with SNCC or CORE, of other groups who matriculated out to San Francisco. And at that particular point in time, we found them. And people like Sonia Sanchez was out there in summer 1966. There were poets like Reggie Lockett. I know we were reading Donnell Lee, who is now Haki Marabudi. And those are the kind of things that happened. And fortunately, there was a connection because they were former SNCC members between Ralph Featherstone, remember Ralph? Stokely, and H. Rap Brown. And the BSU, the Black Student Union, had gained control of the Associated Student budget by the spring of 1967, and we brought Amiri Baraka out there to start a communication project. At the same time, once the party took its action, the Black Panther Party took its action in Sacramento, and once after Bobby Hudson's death and Huey's arrest and everything that happened after that, all of a sudden the whole area was on fire. I mean, everything was drawn to that right there. So consequently, as a member of the Black Student Union, we began to develop a relationship with the Black Panther Party that lasted, and it was this, and I'll say this, with no uncertain term, had not it been that radicalization and that relationship with the Black Panther Party, we might not have gone on strike in 1968. We might not have gone straight to form the ethnic studies program, the Black Studies program and the ethnic studies program. And it was the party, through its own community mobilization, that were our biggest supporters during that strike. It brought in other people like Cecil Williams and everything, but the party, the two of us, in fact, we even had political education classes together at that time in 1968, during the strike of 1968. So as the party was going through that intense period where COINTEL and where it was being attacked, at the same time, we were supportive, mutually supportive of each other, and supportive in that effort, on the effort of getting an ethnic studies program, because it had become a mass strike, not just the black students, but a mass strike, and also supporting the party and doing whatever we could do.
I'd like to contribute. Actually, you had quite a few students who were Panthers.
Yes,
in the BSU.
That's right. In the BSU, quite a few students were Panthers in the BSU. That's the other thing. And so at one point in time, in the BSU, we weren't radical enough, and some of the part of the BSU joined the Black Panther Party.
Amazing.
Wow.
And Brian, you were
as a
about
toddler,
3?
I was deeply committed to Black Power. It was inborn. No, obviously, I was a toddler. Just listening to you all talk, I'm struck by the enthusiasm and the energy that you have for these moments now, still. And I think there's something about this film and this book that raises for a new generation that has not yet, and I'm talking about my generation and younger, has not yet tasted what it feels like to feel like you have collective power. Like, wow, there were 5 of us. How are we going to get them out of jail? Like, if we just get together, we can change things. We don't walk around thinking that. You're clapping because we should walk around thinking that, but we don't. And that's why I'm so excited just to be sitting up here, but I'm excited to do anything I can for myself and for others to teach about this movement, to go back to the questions that were raised in this era, the question of power. Can we do things and change things? I will just say one thing, which was I watched this film with my father, who was not involved in the movement, but he had no personal connection to any of the people that you're describing, but the way in which, from his experience, he came from the North but went to school in the South, this film, he turned to me and said, you know what, Brian? These people kicked in the doors that I walked through. The film humanized people, and he was over and over again struck by their intelligence, their charisma, the fact that they're saying things that just made so much sense. And I think that's part of why they want to bury the Black Power tradition, why they are still after the Black Power militants and people who are involved in this movement, and why the question of bringing this history back to light is still important, it still matters, and it's still dangerous in America.
You take what was, there's so many things happening in San Francisco and Oakland at the time. You take the redevelopment in San Francisco. I met Hank Jones in 1966 when we were going to Waco meetings right there in the Fillmore, as the Waco was trying to put some sort of stopgap on redevelopment and the removal, what I call redevelopment, Negro removal. You know what I'm saying? Removal from their homes and forcing them to move their homes. But I met Hank then and others, and other people who were part of the Black Panther Party, and the way in which was so amazing, and this comes from SNCC and all the groups, which we all were, their organizing capacity. I think what happened to the BSU was that one of the things that we learned and began to cultivate there, and a number of us, was our organizing ability. Yeah. Because that's what they are. So those elements that came to the Black Panther Party, they were part of what was happening in an incredible moment. And since San Francisco State was a teacher college, it had 10 tutorial centers around the city. There were 10 tutorial centers. And we would begin to infiltrate those tutorial centers. We were always talking about how do we use that as a platform for mobilizing the community around education. So now we were working with them around the issue of housing, removal, et cetera, and around education at that time.
Well, you guys have already answered my next question.
I'm sorry.
But I'll always have more. No, but something, I want to touch on something Brian did say, and that is, how we only got to see one side of the movement in terms of what the media allowed us to see, right? So this film does a totally different thing. It takes us inside to humanize the people who were part of it. And that's something we were talking about behind in the green room. And that's something that we don't get to see too often. And I think that that's something that this film does extremely well. And with that in mind, I'd like to show clip number 1. If we could roll clip 1, please.
And to turn, burn, baby, burn. Called President Johnson on the telephone. Humphrey said he wasn't at home. Tried to get hold of Dr. Martin Luther King. Abernathy said he wasn't there. Yeah. Couldn't get no oil from the Rockefeller wells. I couldn't get no diamonds from his mine. Yeah. If I can enjoy the American dream, it won't be water but the fire next time. So I said, burn, baby, burn, burn, baby, burn. This is for the FBI. We went down to the pit. That's a hot line. That's just like man. Nothing is wasted. Everything just takes a different form. What form will you take when you die? Shit.
The next thing is when he was burning the flame, he said, "This is for the FBI." And he was maybe a fiery speaker and had passionate ideas, but he was a calm, cool, collected person. And so he's singing about this is for the FBI, but it's just words. It's just song and words. A few years ago, I was listening to Stokely Carmichael speeches while I was preparing for a new record I was working on. And it was shortly after 9/11 in America. I was making a reservation on JetBlue Airlines to fly to California. When I got to the airport, the FBI, the CIA, the TSA, they came and intercepted me, all these guys in black suits, and they took me in a back room and started questioning me about this Stokely Carmichael speech that I was listening to. They probably, had some sort of bug or some sort of tap or something, but they were very concerned with me listening to this Stokely Carmichael speech from 1967. 40 years ago. So words that he said 49, we have gangster rappers. We have rappers who talk about shooting other people all the time, killing, but the FBI's not looking for them. They're looking at me because I'm listening to this speech from 40 years ago. And it shows you the power of those words is that they resonate even to now. The FBI is still scared of this man. He's, he doesn't have nearly the same influence over our community as he did then.
So I was saving that for later. That wasn't the clip I wanted to show. Because I knew you were going to respond like you did. But I think it still plays to the point that you were making about why it is still so dangerous. Why is the movement still considered so dangerous? I mean, this is Talib Kweli today saying how the FBI stops him at the airport because he's listening to a Stokely Carmichael speech from 1967. What is that saying about where we are today, and how can we, where can we go from here? I mean, it's as though we are gone backwards another 40 plus years.
Well, I think they went to great lengths to put that genie back in the bottle. They brought in from the cold whoever they could into offices or, into the party. And for the rest, it was punishment duty and mass incarceration. And that continues. I couldn't believe when I saw Assata Shakur's face over the highway. It's like I think that they had to put down the Black radical movement in part because it inspired so many other movements, and so many other parts of what was happening in America were trying to model themselves in many ways on the Panthers and on people like Stokely Carmichael. So they went to all that expense and length and involvement to make that happen, and now I feel that that they just can't roll that back and say, oh, sorry, we messed up. We shouldn't have had all those people, in prison.
Well, the media coverage at the time of Stokely Carmichael's activity in the Black Power era was extraordinarily twisted. And they tried to make him seem all sorts of things. They wanted to expose your arrest, talk about you like a dog, and they're trying to get him. Even one congressman said, he should be the subject of retroactive birth control. I mean, it was terrible. This is when he was down in Cuba. And so the way they tried to demonize and isolate the information you could get from Stokely or any of us was horrendous. However, in Sweden, the government policy towards what was going on in the United States was entirely different. In fact, they were quite curious, and they could let cameramen go anywhere and talk to anyone and do whatever they wanted. Sweden also had a different policy about covering America. They didn't follow the U.S. views of itself or the Vietnam War. They also taught in their media, or you could read in their media, stories about what they call the other America. So this is about the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and it wasn't with a sense of horror or fear. It was like, this is news. People were interested. They invited that footage was Stokely in Sweden, I believe. And so people were going around the world and making it clear what the Black movement was about, and it was very exciting, and Stokely was very charming and sexy and handsome, and people were attracted to this. But that wasn't allowed here. The people who were attracted were cornered off in one room, and a lot of the times the audiences would be all Black, or if they were white, people would be condemned. So the whole reception in the media and in the society of who Stokely was and what he was about was entirely different. And that's what they wanted to perpetuate, like hate white people. That's what it was supposed to be about. Kill white people. This is what the FBI wanted to think these Black movements were about, so that they could justify how they were abused.
Something else too, and we know this, and we can see this throughout American history, the idea of controlling ideas, the idea of controlling our imagination. Imagine this right here, this process, which we've always, in some sense, was a very democratic process. It wasn't the kind of hierarchical process that happened with the Black Panther Party, a very democratic process. Then and the Black Panther Party and the Black Power movement as well. Then you had people like these charismatic figures, like this young woman right here. And I remember when she came on, she became just an iconic figure in that sense. and that she was really married to a major spokesman of the Black Power movement and also was connected to the Black Panther Party. Those were the kind of ideas that, in some sense, incredible ideas, incredible visual ideas. In some sense, they wanted to control that. They wanted to cut this and sever that.
A little too visionary.
Yeah. And, I'm sorry?
A little too visionary.
Yeah, those visionaries. And because they're charismatic, as Kathleen was, or Stokely, or many of the other faces that we know about that, or Huey himself. The moment you saw Huey sitting in that chair with the rifle right there, the question is always, as young people, even when I was young, when I saw those young SNCC students who were working down there, I wanted to be like them. I was like 14, 15 years old. I wanted to be like them. Imagine you have Huey P. Newton, this gorgeous man, and people running around wanting to be like him. You know, you had to sever that idea as well.
Wow. Okay, now I'd like to try to get to the clip I was looking for before, which is labeled on my page, Stokely Carmichael.
And to turn, burn, baby, burn. Called President Johnson on the telephone. Humphrey said he wasn't at home. Tried to get hold of Dr. Martin Luther King. Abernathy said he wasn't there. Yeah. Couldn't get no oil from the Rockefeller wells. I couldn't get no diamonds from his mine. Yeah. If I can enjoy the American dream, it won't be water but the fire next time. So I said, burn, baby, burn, burn, baby, burn. This is for the FBI. We went down to the pit street. That's a hot line. That's just like man. Nothing is wasted. Everything just takes a different form. What form will you take when you die? Shit.
The next thing is when he was burning the flame, he said, "This is for the FBI." And he was maybe a fiery speaker and had passionate ideas, but he was a calm, cool, collected person. And so he's singing about this is for the FBI, but it's just words. It's just song and words. A few years ago, I was listening to Stokely Carmichael speeches while I was preparing for a new record I was working on. And it was shortly after 9/11 in America. I was making a reservation on JetBlue Airlines to fly to California. When I got to the airport, the FBI, the CIA, the TSA, they came and intercepted me, all these guys in black suits, and they took me in a back room and started questioning me about this Stokely Carmichael speech that I was listening to. They probably, had some sort of bug or some sort of tap or something, but they were very concerned with me listening to this Stokely Carmichael speech from 1967, 40 years ago. So words that he said 49, we have gangster rappers. We have rappers who talk about shooting other people all the time, killing, but the FBI's not looking for them. They're looking at me because I'm listening to this speech from 40 years ago. And it shows you the power of those words is that they resonate even to now. The FBI is still scared of this man. He's, he doesn't have nearly the same influence over our community as he did then.
But what I did want to talk about in reference to that clip is this sort of behind-the-scenes look at the leaders of the movement. I never saw this kind of footage before. I saw this film. And what was it about these young Swedish filmmakers, journalists, that allowed them that kind of access? And why would they look for that?
Because they could do what they wanted. They weren't, I'm sorry, they could do what they wanted. They were not told by their editor, do this, do that. I saw footage in this film that completely blew my mind. I don't even remember Swedish TV particularly, but in Algeria, they showed images of the building where we were. No one in America has ever seen pictures of the building of the international section of the Black Panther Party, other than a little picture in the New York Times one magazine in 1970, November 1st. That's the only picture I've ever seen. Eldridge Cleaver is supposed to be dead and gone. You can't turn on TV and hear what he has to say, but in this film, they show him saying, oh yes, we want to reach the level of the Vietnamese and make a provisional revolutionary government. He said, but we haven't got there yet. And can you imagine? FBI would just not allow, because the United States was at war. That's part of it, the politics of war, the politics of anti-communism, and the fundamental, insanely psychotic level of white supremacist madness that we were being subjected to. And apparently, somehow or other, they saw it didn't affect us, that we were not responsive. We didn't go along with white supremacy. In fact, we challenged it very openly and condemned it and made fun of it, as Stokely did. And we had a whole movement around the country and around the world that's repudiating it. So this probably, in the context of the Vietnam War, in the context of their own sense of being disrespected, you know, the names that they got called, et cetera, might have had something to do with how they responded to this. But also it intimidates the press and intimidates people, and they're afraid. They're afraid to get to know these people.
And another part of the Black Power movement is that it internationalized the struggle here of African Americans. The collaborations with the struggles in Vietnam, Algeria. This is right after the Algeria liberation, and also connected with the African Liberation Support Committee groups within on the continent, whether it was FLIMO, ZANU, or ANC. All of this about, in some sense, carried out an enormous power and resonated with people. So now, while the civil rights movement, for all intents and purposes, was an internal struggle within the United States, dealing with racism, white supremacy. Now we begin to call into question of the system of capitalism, capitalist exploitation. All those begin to frame the discourse. So you're making alliances in Algeria, connecting to what was happening in Vietnam, connecting to other movements that are happening around the world. Malcolm did it when he went to Mecca, you know what I'm saying, and came back and began to talk about the international relationship, began to talk about taking the struggle of African Americans to the UN, in the same sense, in real terms. And now you have a local grassroots organizations who are doing that work, who are talking about building through community protection from police, free schools, free health care, breakfast for children. Breakfast for children now, it was the predecessor to the government's breakfast for children now. Breakfast for children was started by the Black Panther Party. Thank you. And we don't remember that. Forget that. So you have all these particular things that are happening within the community on a local level, taking it on a local level and then building national and international networks with that. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it is dangerous.
It's
yeah,
still dangerous.
Obviously.
I think also, just about your question, America has a tendency to pathologize black people. America thinks there's something wrong with black people. Genetically, culturally, psychologically. The reason shifts, but it's always something. And it's never, and so it's hard for people living here to step outside of that, step outside of white supremacy and just ask an honest question like, why are you in jail? What are you doing here? Why do you do the things that, you know, even to this day, radicals are portrayed as kind of irrational people whose radicalness flows from their irrational psychological problems instead of flowing from their conditions of life. And so a Swede might as well be from Mars. They don't know any better. They might as well ask Angela Davis, you know, why are you here? And she says, well, okay, let's talk about why I'm here. Oh, wow, thanks for asking me a question. Okay, let's talk. Wow, and now I'm talking, the camera's just still rolling. It's just me telling you, unedited, what it is I actually think. And when people see that, they're so struck by it, taken in by it, that you know, you start to think, wow, maybe these people just grew up in horrible conditions and got the big idea that they could try to do something to change it. Maybe that's what this whole thing is about, not some pathological problem with black people. It makes us want to run in the streets.
With that reference to Angela Davis, thank you for that lead in, Brian. Can we go to clip number 3, please?
Trial, I think, will be historic in its unfairness. There's no evidence at all to involve Ms. Davis in the charges, none whatsoever. And I think that they seized upon this opportunity to try and put her to death. Governor Reagan originally fired her from her teaching job at the University of California, and this is simply an extension of that, as far as I'm concerned. The evidence presented to the grand jury shows that the guns that were used in the shootout in San Rafael were registered in her name. Now, assuming for the sake of argument that that's true, that's all it shows, that she owns some guns. There's nothing illegal in the state of California about owning guns. They were registered, and it's not a crime. But because of the inflammatory press that had built up around this incident, and because of the need that the government felt to put her in jail and to hopefully, from their point of view, to kill her, they could put enough pressure in that grand jury room to get an indictment.
The actual interview with Angela in this film is priceless. It is Angela in jail, and you've never seen this footage anywhere else if you haven't seen this film. So, Kathleen, I'd love you to talk a little bit about the women of the movement. I mean, we know about Angela, we know that you were the first female leader within the party.
No, that's not true. The first one was Joanne Mitchell, who was actually a student at San Francisco State and the VSU. She was the women's captain. I became on the Central Committee, but she was the women's captain before there was a Central Committee. And, this idea of leaders, the movement, the civil rights movement in the South was mobilized, organized, dominated by the activities of women. And the men who are spokesmen are designated leaders, and they are written about in the press, and they go to meetings, but they don't actually reveal, that doesn't actually reveal the way the movements evolve. When you put the term leaders, then people sort of unconsciously want to see a male. But that doesn't mean that all the work and all the leadership and all the education and all the programming wasn't done by quite a few women. And in the Black Panther Party, the people who started it, 2 guys started it, Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, but then as time went on and more men got arrested and more cases, it got to the point where the majority of actual live, on-the-ground Panthers were women. And so I think there's no major effort in the larger society to understand what radical movements are about, and there's definitely no larger movement to understand what leadership of Black women is about. That doesn't mean it's not there, but that means it's discounted.
Dan, you want to add anything?
I can't answer that. It was, I think about too often, and you mentioned understanding what Black radicalism is. There's a Black radical tradition throughout the 20th century that we don't call on. We think of the moments, specific moments in time, when we look at the civil rights movement. But if you look at the beginning of the 20th century, W.B. Du Bois and others, Padmore, all those kind of leaders, the Communist Party, those who came through the Communist Party. And you look at, and then look at who was at the Manchester Conference, on the Manchester Conference on Pan-Africanism. There we go, beginning of the 20th century, Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, there you have some of the future leaders of the Caribbean, future leaders of Africa. So this is, and C.L.R. James, you have all these great people who come and are part of this radical tradition. And we're always never never embraced that part of it, you know, and even today, in terms of understanding that it does, what has happened, whatever changes happen, you have to step outside of the context that you're functioning in, outside of the context, and find another voice and another narrative for liberation. And that is most happily coming through the Black radical tradition. So the Panther Party, the Black Power movement is much of a larger historical context. And then as I said before, it is a reimagining of democracy. And you're bringing people to the table and reimagining democracy, having them participate in their own liberation. It's a reimagining of this. They're not waiting, looking for for democracy to play its game out in some other way. They themselves take the reign of it and use the process itself.
Well, the movement that I joined, the Black Power movement, evolved out of the civil rights movement in the Deep South. And in the Deep South, many of the leaders were actually women. They weren't given that title, but the organization of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, was actually created or started. The conference was called by Ella Baker, who was on the staff of the SCLC, and she was essentially the inspiration and the mentor, and she allowed the leadership within that youth organization called Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to mature and develop. And by the time I moved to California, the fall of '67, there was a woman who had been elected the executive secretary, Ruby Doris Robinson, very, very well acknowledged leader. I remember seeing pictures of her in Ebony magazine with her microphone, and she was a leader of the Sojourner Motor Fleet in Mississippi, summer of '64. I was so impressed. Oh, I mean, it was so inspiring to see young people, young women, young men working together, challenging these sheriffs, going to jail, singing in the paddy wagons, going on these buses that got burned up. Diane Nash was the leader of the freedom rides. And so this notion of being a revolutionary, being a radical, being a woman, they weren't inconsistent. However, I will say a large part of the American population had not yet been educated to the fact that there was this leadership within women. And so when they see the organizations, they don't see the leadership because it's coming out of a tradition that they're not familiar with.
Absolutely. You know, it was Dr. Dorothy Height who sent Stokely and others from Howard University down to SNCC. You know, it was Ella Baker who brought Bob Moses down to SNCC. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Right. That's what Kathleen is talking about.
I think sometimes, too, America tells itself a story about these movements that undercuts the kind of work that those women leaders were doing. Where it's like, that is all put behind the scenes, and as far as we understand, these were overnight success stories. This was who's America's next great, civil rights leader contest, and just whoever gets up on stage wins it. Not that this was something that was built over decades of work. I just to flag a couple great books that are out there, Barbara Ransby's book about Ella Baker is amazing, and also Jean Theo Harris has a book about Rosa Parks, about whom this mythology has reached just incredible proportions. The degree to which we cut off Rosa Parks from who she actually was as an organizer is astounding, and it does a disservice to all the people who are laboring in tough conditions, trying to figure out, banging their head against a wall, but trying to keep at it, seeing no fruits of their labor for years and years and years, and feeling like nothing's gonna give. And to celebrate her accomplishment, and when she moves into the limelight, but to forget the decades that preceded it, also does a disservice to those of us who are trying to follow in her footsteps.
Right. Brian, I'm glad you said that, because I want to talk to you about, as an educator, you've been in the New York City public schools for over 9 years now. How do we get this information, this film, this book, into the core curriculum of the New York City public schools? I'm not talking
Funny
about...
choice of words.
I'm not talking... Yes, core curriculum, I know exactly what that means. And I'm not talking about a once of the year, during Negro Hysteria Month. I'm talking... I have to give credit to Zainabu Irene Davis, filmmaker friend of mine. She coined that phrase, not I. And I use it all the time. So thank you, Zainabu. She's listening, I'm sure. But really, I mean, we don't want this as a once-a-year thing. We want this embedded as American history, not as Black history.
That's right. It's American history. There is no America without the Africans who were kidnapped and brought here that built the country. There's no country. And so at every stage in American history, the Black struggle is central to understanding the whole story of the country. What I found teaching, and by the way, I was an elementary school teacher, teaching little ones, 8 of those years in Harlem. That's what students want to learn about. It's not hard. The hard part is trying to deal with the demands of high-stakes standardized testing, trying to deal with all of the demands and everything they're putting on our schools, dealing with the budget cuts and the school closings and the privatization. That's the problem. But the problem is not, in my view, how to get it to kids. Kids want to learn real history. History about people fighting back, you have them right here in the palm of your hand. Like, wait a minute, wow. They want to learn about that. That is what has them the most riveted and the most interested. And I feel it's not, you don't have to sermonize, you don't have to preach to young people. Their life, when they are exposed to real history, they make their own meaning out of it. That's what every generation has to do, and it's not that hard to see the struggle of yourself and your parents and your cousins and your uncles in the struggles of yesteryear. But what people don't know is that we have a legacy of standing up, of collective power, and of winning, and of feeling that we can win. And that is what we have to let them be exposed to.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. And I know, Anthony, we're ready for cards? I know we have some questions for the audience, but I've got to mention 2 more things. And I know Amy Goodman was here. Did she just leave? Oh, shucks. But
she's waving.
Oh, she's waving. Oh, there she is. Thanks for coming, Amy. Awesome. And Danny, I know you were just on Democracy Now! About a week or so ago.
I'm going to be on tomorrow morning, Kathleen.
Oh, you're going to be on tomorrow?
Yeah, we're going to be
So when was that interview with you on Democracy Now! When you got to speak to Mumia?
Oh, that was some months ago.
That was some months ago? That was awesome. I just saw that recently. Danny was...
right after the court decision.
Can you say...
I'm sorry, it was right after them dropping the death penalty, and we knew we had reached one stage where we still have to free Mumia. We still have to free Mumia.
Right.
Mumia.
And that, on that show, Amy surprised you by getting Mumia on the phone, right?
Yeah, I remember that. It was quite
yes,
emotional for me.
Everybody should go watch that. It was how, I mean, you'd been fighting for his freedom for over 20 years.
Well, Ozzie Davis and I were part of the defense committee.
Wow.
Ozzie Davis, talking about someone.
There we go. Right.
Ozzie Davis, we were on the defense committee way back. Yeah.
And here we are still trying to get him out of jail. He's off death row, but he's still in prison.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was on the defense committee of Geronimo Pratt as well.
Wow.
Way back, as well.
Wow. Wow.
I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my producing partner, Jocelyn Barnes.
Just Jocelyn. Where's Jocelyn?
It's Jocelyn. I mean, we're
Jocelyn, stand up.
Producer of the film Black Power Mixtape.
Producer.
It's her. It's her happening. All the work that Yoren did and everything else is Jocelyn has found various ways in which we can involve the community, have it seen, having the kind of discussion and the discourse as well. And also, I have a great friend here. He's my little brother here. And he's one of the great filmmakers in the world, Ilyas Suleiman.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience now, and I'm going to start off with one that I know is from a student of ours, Ms. Alexandra Salazar. She asked, it is clear that activism has changed over the years. It seems as if it has become more individually based. How do you think we can make it collective once again?
Well, first of all, the problems that any activist is attempting to address are collective problems. If you have individually based solutions, they're not going to work. Mm-hmm. So just first of all, be realistic, and secondly, regroup and learn organizing, not posturing, not rattling off things out of your head, organizing, putting together people in a group or a motion of some sort where they participate collectively in making choices and in implementing their decisions.
That's excellent. Yes, thank you very much. Here's another question. Says that we made a comment in the beginning that we're removed, several generations removed from the movement, yet the struggle still continues. My question is, what advice, direction, and or request do you have of young people today in terms of continuing and or honoring that struggle?
I missed part of that.
What advice, direction, or request do you have of young people to continue the struggle, honoring the struggle?
Well, I see it all the time. You know, I was just in Chicago, and there's a young man named Emmanuel Pratt in Chicago on the South Side. He has a fishery. He's teaching young kids not only sustainability in terms of food production, growing food and fish and everything else, he's also made a business out of it. That's the kind of activism that we need, the kind of examples we need. I've been spending the last year with a group of students in Mississippi, the Mississippi Students for Justice, and the Students for a Better Nissan, working and supporting Nissan workers in Canton, Mississippi. 7 of those students sat in at Nissan a week and a half ago in protests against one of the organizers who's organizing, advocating for a union, sat in that office, sang freedom songs, and they gave him his job back. That's the kind of activism I see on those levels.
And we don't hear about that.
What I'm saying is that the question is that all of the activism that we've come out of has been transformative in the sense. So we have to understand that activism not only is, and when it becomes individualized, it's not transformative. You only have activism that's transformative when it's collective. The transformation, when you saw young brothers put that jacket on and put that tam on and everything else, was extraordinary. Or women, and all those things were extraordinary. So it has to be transformative. We may use what is in existence now in the systems and find alliances, building alliances that service what needs to be done at the moment. That doesn't take away from the fact that we have to change this. Just as the party said, we still have to change this. No matter what we've gone through and no matter what we have in the White House, we still have to change this shit. You know what I'm saying? And that's transformative. Where do we find that? How do we now connect into that and understand that? As Grace Lee Boggs says, evolution, revolution, evolution.
What I think is problematic is that the level of activism that's underway and has been, let's say, for over the last 15, 20 years is not well understood and not well known. If you live in an area where there is a big environmental justice movement, then you hear about it because you live there. Right. But if you live 6 states away, you don't even know it exists. Right. So you make the assumption it's not existing. Right. So there's a communications issue and a reluctance or a hostility in the larger media to show anything that involves collective action involving young people, young black people, but sometimes they have to show it, like the protest in Jena, Louisiana. They couldn't not show it. Right. All right. Yeah. All right.
But and we're finally hearing 3 weeks later in mainstream press about the Nigerian girls being kidnapped. 3 weeks later, yes.
When Trayvon Martin was murdered in Florida, 22 high schools in Florida had walkouts. How many of you heard that? How many of you had wall-to-wall coverage and interviews with the organizers? Because you know what? Somebody organized 22 high schools to walk out. Those things don't just happen. So I just was thinking about that when you were speaking. There's a way in which there's a blackout that makes it difficult for us to even connect to strands of organizing that are going on. I think we benefit from a general ethos of solidarity, of connecting the dots, of assuming that our various struggles are connected to each other, related to each other, dependent on each other, and on that basis, expecting and trying to build solidarity between different struggles and different movements and different issues.
And using this technology that you are using now, tweeting and texting, to instill this connection and getting the word out more that we don't get through the mainstream press. We have the technology. Let's use it. So, Danny, another question for you. I heard that you wanted to make a film about the Haitian Revolution. What is the status? And I think this person would launch a Kickstarter campaign for you if you wanted to.
I met Jocelyn Barnes 15 years ago on a set in Dakar, Senegal. A movie that we were doing. It was that she had translated the script, gotten the rights from the book, the novel, found the director, found the money to do the film. And we were sitting one night, as you sit trying to find something to do when you're doing an all-night shoot. And she mentioned, we were talking about what are the things we want to do. And it's like the whole sky lit up when we said the Haitian Revolution. And that discussion itself, beginning there, led to the relationship that formed Louverture Films, and known as Louverture after Toussaint. Louverture Films that brought us Black Power Mixtape. We still have a vision because that is the centerpiece of our company. We still have a vision of doing that. But all the other kind of relationships that we've had, the time that remains with Ilyas Suleiman, Uncle Boomni, who recalls his past lives, with Apacha Pong, the relationships with Trouble the Water, all you can go on, what we have coming out now, what we've done in the past, and everything else. While we're trying to get to that point, we'll get to that point of doing this movie. But there's so many other things that have evolved out of that relationship. And that light came on, and we knew we wanted to form a company to bring the kind of work that we saw here, to find a Yoram, to find someone else, to support African filmmakers. You know, those are the kind of things that have evolved out of that. So that's where we go until further notice with the Haitian Revolution.
Okay. And as soon as you need our support on that, Danny, please let us know. I think that's a really important issue. This is a question from a documentary filmmaker doing a doc on a black homeless veteran who says that slavery is alive and well in America today. He believes that black folks needs to look inside themselves and not at white folks to tell them who they are. Your thoughts?
I'd just like to comment. I passed a man on the street this afternoon. He had a sign that said, homeless veteran, please give me whatever you can for food. And I walked past him, I thought about it, I said, this is insane. And so I went up to him, I found some dollars, singles, and I said, I'm sorry, this is all I have, but this is crazy. He told me that 75% of the homeless in New York are veterans. That tells you something about the level of lack of coherence, lack of compassion, lack of reality in the government that we have, okay? If 75% of the homeless in New York City are veterans, and one of them's, and they're begging for money. This is crazy. So The VA, of course, we know is a disaster. But what I wanted to get at is the manner in which we access information and we participate in communities has been radically altered by the politics of this country. Back in the time when the Black Panthers and the radicals and all these different groups were percolating up, the United States was not the #1 total leader of the world. The United States is in competition. There was a war undergoing between people who were on the capitalist side and people who were against the capitalist side. It was called the Vietnam War, and it went on for quite some time. And it ended in Vietnam becoming its independent country as it should have been. But that was many, many years ago, and at this point there is no opposition to the world domination of the economic system of the United States. And that alters entirely how people can function within this country and how they think and how they respond to each other. We have to get out of this one world, whatever it is. What was Bush's thing? New World Order.
World Order, yeah.
We got to get out of and behind this new world, ugly order, to get to a better order where we can communicate and do something to solve the problems that we actually have.
With that in mind, I've actually got a question that I've been dying to ask Brian, having to do with the model and the syndrome and the system that seems to be evolving in our education system today, and that is the notion of the pipeline to prison through our schools. And I want to know if you have any ideas about how we should be mobilizing around that issue to break up that model, and are there some instances that you can tell us about that are doing?
Okay, well, first of all, we need to stop stopping and frisking students in the hallways of schools. Stop giving them repeated summons for petty offenses that then pile up. Stop policing them in the hallways of their own buildings. I think that's just an obvious place to start. But we have to add to that the things that are alienating students increasingly that are pushing them in those directions. So if we have a highly standardized curriculum and a high pressure testing, all of that is just a giant sorting mechanism that has nothing to do with genuine inquiry, nothing to do with intellectual development, nothing to do with teaching and learning. And for students who are already pissed off, maybe with good reason, this curriculum and these mandates and those standardized this, that, and the other are just yet another reason to check out from the school experience, and you can hardly blame them. It's stultifying, it's boring. Now turn to page 35. It's ridiculous. And they even want to take, if you go on the Common Core website, they want to take things that are explosive in our history, and they want to take away the teeth, take away the danger from it. They want you to teach the letter from a Birmingham jail without ever talking to the students about why King is in a jail. They want you to teach the Gettysburg Address without talking about the field littered with bodies that Lincoln is standing in and why the field is littered with bodies. They want you to teach a kind of decontextualized skill set that has nothing to do with why you need skills in the first place. Close reading. Why does anybody read? I'm sorry, I could just go on and on about, but that is, it's not just the metal detectors. It's not just the metal detectors. It's not just the police in the hallways. I'm trying to say there's something else that's going on that's making school culturally irrelevant to people and insensitive to them and who they are in a way that then feeds into the other thing as well. So it's not just locking up 6-year-olds, although they're locking up 6-year-olds. It's not just that, it's also what they're happening to the process of school itself.
And how do we correct that? What is it going to take for us to move beyond that?
Well, first of all, we have to overcome the high bar that's been set over and over again by the Supreme Court that says a pattern of racism doesn't count as racism. You have to catch somebody saying the N-word. So if you're not, what's his name, Cliven, idiot head rancher, or Donald Sterling, if you're not dumb enough to get caught on camera saying oafish, ridiculous things, that you could do anything you want to black people. You could shoot them down. And then they're obsessing. Did Zimmerman say the N-word? Who cares? Who cares what came out of his mouth? It's what came out of his gun. You can do anything to people as long as you don't say those old-fashioned those old-fashioned words that show that you're a racist. As long as you keep that off the table, you can do anything to people. And we have to say, no, that's racist. If most of the kids getting put in handcuffs at age 6 are black, that's racist. If most of the schools getting shut down are schools with predominantly black teachers and predominantly black students, then that's racist. The pattern proves it. That, I think, has to be what we say. And we have to say that this kind of colorblind society that claims every institution in America, every institution has a plaque on the wall swearing up and down that they are colorblind and going to treat everybody equal.
Post-racial, yes.
Post-racial. And so we have to say this kind of colorblindness is the new racism.
Oh, yeah.
Do either one of you want to respond to that?
Sorry, I went on. Sorry.
Well, I just wish there was 100 more elementary school teachers that had the same thoughts.
Thank you.
Can we have an institute for elementary school teachers at Bryan?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm working on that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think I'll take one more of the questions from the audience because this is a really good one. It's about coalition building. And it says that many of us are trying to work between coalitions like at the New School, like the Students for Justice in Palestine. Students of the African Diaspora, SOAD, you're here, good. And the Feminist Collective. However, we are having trouble getting folks to believe that these struggles can constitute each other. How do we get people to see that and believe that?
Well, it's a challenge of organizing, but it's also a form of community building. You will organize and talk to people that you know because you sat down and you ate lunch, or you went for a walk, or you're in a class. I mean, it's kind of hard to organize with strangers. So you have to form connections and build alliances and build relationships in the process of developing political challenges. And that's very, very key, because if you don't do that, your little political challenges just don't go anywhere. And I'm sure some of you have had that experience.
I think it's also political education. If you don't know that the NYPD learned how to occupy the Bronx by going to the training center in Ramallah, then you don't know the connections between occupation and occupation. So we have a lot of political educating to do to realize ourselves the connections between our different struggles and make those visible.
You know, I've spent some time around the Boggs Center in Detroit, Michigan, and what was so amazing, I remember one evening meeting with about 30 different organizations, small groups of organizations. We were all there at the center. One around rethinking education, one about urban gardening and food production, another, an ex-Panther brother, Ron, I can't think of Ron's last name, who has an organization for peace zones for life. And I've watched all these organizations support each other in the sense and begin to, and I find a way in which they were able to develop a common narrative and to be the driving force for their coalition building. And as Kathleen said, as well as that organizing, so that all those particular things allow us to find ways in which we can build these coalitions, because coalitions are essential. The success of the San Francisco State strike would not have been successful had it not been for African American students, Native American students, Hispanic American students, Asian American students, and progressive white students. It would not have been successful had it not been for that. So it's finding those ways of mobilizing, organizing, and creating the language and the narrative, that language, and I'll use the word several times, the language and narrative of transforming.
And for those students of you in the audience who are looking for a class to take in the fall that's going to re-emphasize that, just a little blatant self-promotion here, I'm teaching race, ethnicity, and class and media in the fall, so feel free to join us. I'd like to close with a couple quotes from the book. Kathleen, you said that, you see there is a systematic decision to prevent the radical leaders from having their natural effect. I mean, it's always difficult to mobilize people, but when in a short time, if you eliminate Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Fred Hampton, not to mention all the others who were being killed, you diminish the strength of that movement. So had King chosen to be more cowardly, maybe he would have lived longer, but that's not the choice he made. Thank you for that. And Danny, you used a reference to Paul Robeson, and we just lost Paul Robeson Jr. this past week, right? And you said each generation, as Paul Robeson said, each generation makes its own history. A new generation must now make its history, but it faces huge challenges, whether it's the climate crisis, the global financial crisis, the crisis of poverty, or the crisis of inequity in the world. But we don't have to start anew. All of us can draw on the immense resources of those who have struggled before us. And the people in the Black Power Mixtape, 1967 to 1975, gave us strong shoulders to stand up. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And if you have any closing remarks you'd like to make, we could do that now. And then we want to invite people to stay for the book signing and for more DJ Hustle and some regular roundtable talking. So, Danny, Kathleen?
Well, I'd just like to say people have to believe that they can do this. Jim Foreman used to always say, I admired him immensely. He was my first mentor in SNCC. I never worked so hard in my life. The first weekend I got to Atlanta, I don't think I slept but 3 hours in the whole weekend. Taking notes with Jim Foreman's meeting, and it was really SNCC was in chaos, collapsing. And so, but what I was going to say is you have to be able to believe in yourself, believe what you want to do, and know, like Jim Foreman used to always say, we will win without a doubt. I said, yeah, but Jim, but when? So we have to put when off the table and believe that we can win. If we don't win, you could be sure this is a country going down the tubes, a little fascist hole in the future.
I mean, I think one of the things that we've come away from just this evening and what we've seen in Black Power Mixtape is enormous contributions that have been made in the past. And as we've all said, in so many words, we can build on that, you know. And even though we feel as if we're at some sort of impasse in our capacity to build and struggle, we're still here. And there's so many of us, this audience right here, the young people in this audience is a testimony to the necessity of the work that we have to do. We're here, we're available, we want them to, in some sense, develop their tools of analysis, of truth-telling, to listen to old stories, and build and create new stories.
Everywhere I go, I feel like I see young people trying to absorb something from the Black Power movement. I see them reading Malcolm X on the train, or Fanon, or if I wear my Angela Davis t-shirt, inevitably I'm stopped 27 times trying to go somewhere. I feel that there is a new generation that's trying to figure out how to break out of that impasse And what we should understand here, and I think we do understand in this room, is that there is an important legacy here that's essential to what it is that we have to do from here and for that breakthrough. That's why they want to bury it, and that's why we want to present it in a film, in a book, in whatever form we can. We need to get it out there. And lastly, I just want to say, I am so proud to be sitting up here with two of these kind of heroic figures from the Black Power movement.
You and me both, Ryan.
Thank you, Universe and Anthony, for putting me up here.
Thank you so much, Anthony from Haymarket Books, for putting this together tonight. And thank you all for coming. And please do stay and get your book signed by our two powerhouses on the stage here. Thank you so much.